Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday Night Live. So, since it is debate night and I'm doing this at the same time as the debate, why not get a little controversial and political, but not in the way that you might normally expect it? Oh, thank you, Stacy, for the super chat. I appreciate it. What a great way to come on. So, as the title of the video says, why the two-party system is a trap and this communism versus socialism thing. So basically, we have one side saying, if you vote for Trump, you're voting for fascism. The other side says, if you vote for Kamala, you're voting for communism. And this is one of the oldest games in the American playbook. So I'm going to show you something from a book today. It's called None Dare Call It Conspiracy. This is like an original copy from the 70s, so it's in terrible condition, but this is a classic OG conspiracy reference. And one of my favorite things, sorry, I had to tape the book together. It was in good condition when I got it 10 years ago. I don't know what happened since it's been in my possession. But this page has ripped because I look at this so often. So here, I want you guys to take a look at this chart. Okay. So what we see here is on one side, so I'll give you a little description and then I'll show you the chart again. So these two charts, the top chart is what the powers that be want us to believe. And then the bottom chart is the actual political makeup, okay, of what our real two-party system actually is and truly in our government. So this is why this book that was published in 1971 is using the exact same talking points that we are using in the election in 2024 today. Oh, if you vote for the right, fascism. If you vote for the left, communism. Well, this is one of the oldest games in the book, and this was old enough that in the 70s they were able to clearly break it down. So this is what they want you to believe. Let's see here. Okay. So you see, if we go, it might be reversed, but you'll get the point. So see, if we go too far in one direction, we're going to get communism, which is dictatorship. And we go too far in the other direction, we're going to get fascism, which is dictatorship. They want us to believe that democracy is some little sweet spot right in the middle, right in the center of two forms of dictatorship. We can just place your freedom right here. And this is partly because they are lying to us about the type of government that we have. We are constantly seeing the word democracy thrown around. However, this is not a democracy that we live in. It's a constitutional republic. It's a democratic republic, not a democracy. So if this was an actual democracy, we would be able to vote on everything, every single topic everywhere. But because we're a democratic republic, constitutional republic, that means that the Constitution has the highest power. And then we elect people to represent us. So we're the constituents and they represent us. So this is why we have senators, we have congressmen, we have representatives, we have presidents, governors, mayors. That's what makes this not a true democracy. If it was a true democracy, it would be the vote wins. You know, there's 10 people in the room, yay or nay. That's democracy. So that's really important for us to understand, because the fact that most people don't realize that we don't live in a real democracy, it is easy for them to pull this on us. Now let's look at the second chart. So the second chart is what's the truth. So let me go a little closer. On one side, we have total government, communism, fascism, socialism, some other outdated types of government, like we don't even need to talk, the pharaohs, Caesar, those are outdated types of government. And then the opposite of these would be anarchy, no government whatsoever. Not saying that anarchy is the solution, but this would be a true opposite. And then we are right here as a constitutional republic. So we are not anarchy, but based on our constitution, we're also supposed to be pretty far away from this stuff. This is also why there is a big push about the Constitution right now. Both sides are trying to get their dirty hands in the Constitution. So I'm going to read you now some things in this book. Our terms have changed. This book is over 50 years old. So some of our terms have changed. Oh, thank you for the super chat. Thank you. I appreciate that, you guys. Okay, so this book is using the word conservatives. However, conservatives in the 70s doesn't mean what conservatives mean today. Today, we use conservative interchangeable to Republican, and we use liberal interchangeable to Democrat. That's also not true. But so a conservative in this context is saying someone who's kind of conservative to the government, the Constitution, okay? Conservative to the constitutional republic. So this is a quote that was from Mr. Trohan, whoever Mr. Trohan is, okay? All right. There's a bunch of quotes about this. However, this one is really interesting. Conservatives should be realistic enough to recognize that this country is going deeper into socialism and will see the expansion of federal power, whether the Republicans or Democrats are in power. The only comfort they have is that this pace might be slower under Richard Nixon than it might be under Hubert Humphrey. Then later it says the establishment promotes the idea of the inevitable communism through perversion of the terms that it's using. That's what we're saying is it's perversion of the terms that it's using. This is exactly when we hear the Democrats saying, "Oh, Trump is a threat to democracy." However, the threat to democracy that we just experienced was we have a political candidate in their group. And, I'm sure I don't need to say this to the people who are here live because you guys know I've made this very clear. But to anybody who comes across this video later, I'm not on either side of the political spectrum. I have a video that I posted about this today about the left-right political structure, and I'm getting attacked by both sides, which actually makes me very happy when the conservatives are like, "You're so left, aren't you?" And then the left is like, "You dirty far right Fox News watching." And I've been fighting in my comments on Instagram for 48 hours straight, and it's been hilarious because both sides are accusing me of being on the opposite, but only proves my point of why the perversion of the term democracy and the perversion of left and right ideals is creating since 1970s. What they are telling us is that it doesn't matter who you vote for. The answer that they want is dictatorship. Okay. So just to go on a little bit, we're told that the far left of the political spectrum will find communism, but we are also told that equally fear the opposite of the far left, which is the far right, which will then be labeled fascism. We are constantly told that we should try to stay in the middle ground, which is termed democracy, but by which the establishment means Fabian or creeping socialism. The fact that the middle of the road has been moving leftward for over 40 years is being ignored. This book is 50 years old. Okay. So what we see is by this point, 1970s, this author is saying it's been 40 years that the term democracy keeps going closer and closer and closer to communism. So one of the things that I've been battling for the last 48 hours on my Instagram is communism. So there's a lot of people who are really fantasizing about communism, and it's a bit disturbing to me. So happy to be here instead of watching the presidential debate. So, what we get when we live in this left-right political system is an archetype of this reality where we have red versus blue, and basically what that is the Super Bowl. Okay. What we're experiencing is a political version of the Super Bowl. Both teams, it doesn't really matter who wins or loses because every player is getting paid, AKA every politician. Every politician is getting paid. The NFL still wins, still benefits, still makes all the money. The NFL is the political system, the two wings of the same bird. There is one government that benefits from this all. It doesn't matter if you go this direction or you go this direction. And then we have the advertisers and all of those, the businesses and the corporations that all benefit off of the Super Bowl. And at the end of the day, we have the fans in the parking lot fighting to the death about a game that everybody wins except for them, that they paid how many thousands of dollars to be there. And now they're getting their ass kicked or fighting with someone in the parking lot. And this is where we're at right now, is we're the ones fighting in the comment sections. We're the ones that are here arguing to the death. All the players are winning. The NFL is winning. The advertisers and the corporations are all winning. So this is what we need to understand. Okay. So, let's see. I have some other notes here. So let's talk a little bit about communism. So a lot of people in the comments, like I said, I was getting kind of hit from both sides, and I was really enjoying it. I wasn't even bothered because to me, I like being in the middle of the road. So another thing that was brought up really interesting in my comments was the horseshoe theory. So the horseshoe theory came about when towards the end of World War II, when we had basically, Nazis and the Soviet Union both wreaking havoc on Europe. So we have two political ideologies wreaking havoc all over Europe. And a philosopher, I forget his name, he came up with the concept of the horseshoe theory. So as we know, a horseshoe is shaped like the letter U, right? And actually a little bit more tilted in at the top. So what it says is the far left and the far right are a lot closer than the people on the middle. Okay. So it's like if you go to that, actually, the political spectrum is not a straight line like this. The political spectrum is more of a horseshoe, and the people all on that top part are under the same type of extreme ideologies. And then the people all in the middle, the people who are kind of a bit more Democrat in the middle and a bit more Republican on the middle, and the independents are all actually a lot more alike than the people who are actually the biggest with the biggest mouths. So another thing, one day I was wondering because I'm like, it is so much. I'm hearing so much, and the left has become very extreme lately. And the left, I was thinking, I'm like, gosh, what is going on? Like, what happened to all of the Democrats? What happened to everybody? Like, what is going on? And so I looked at the percentages and I was like, how many voters are extreme progressive, even though it's regressive, but are extreme progressive liberals, and how many voters are fundamentalist extreme Christian on that side? And what was very interesting is that when you look at the number of categories within the left and right and within voters, it's very interesting. So let's say they want us to believe that everything is 50-50. First and foremost, as of 2023, 43% of Americans identify as independent. So that's pretty interesting. They've got us in this fight, in this Super Bowl, when 43% of Americans aren't rooting for either team. Okay, that's something very important to remember when we're hearing all this political discourse, because we have like what 50 days to the election, and it's going to ramp up. And most of the people that are watching my stuff, obviously the people that are here live, but the people who might come across this later, my page tends to deal with spirituality, conspiracies, aliens. So what we're talking about here could bring in a couple of other people, but my core people that watch this are like, we need to maintain our clear head during this and not get sucked up into the triggering aspects of all of this stuff, because it's very easy to get swept in with all the stuff that's going on. So let me go back to those percentages. So when I looked at the percentages, a large portion of both of the left and right of the actual voters, the way that it's broken down, the actual voters, a big chunk is moderate Democrats and kind of your regular fiscal conservatives. Those are kind of bigger groups in both sides. So these are people like your regular average Democrat, your regular average Republican. Neither of them are extreme. Neither of them are really into these ideologies that are being spouted out all the time. This is just kind of their general political leaning, and they're not super passionate about it. When we go to the left, we find that actually this liberal progressive left, these people who are spewing about, Marxism and communism, are actually only 6% of the voters. So it's really interesting that there's a very loud minority. It's the tiniest group. Only 6% of the voters are these leftist extremists. And then you go to the other side and you see that only 10% of the voters are fundamentalist, hardcore, traditional Christian, Republican, conservative. So we're looking at the tiniest sliver. Now, then we have middle middle range people are the biggest, kind of, your kind of centrists and stuff like that. And then we have on this side, like there's little kind of outliers. And then you have your left outliers and your right outliers. And these are people who can kind of not vote, could fall into independent, might like a candidate here and there, but they really like the outlier left. That's more so what I would have considered myself if I had to pick. Now I'm just very, like, super neither. Um, but, I volunteered for Bernie Sanders. Everybody could say, like, "Oh, that's socialism." All okay. Um, One, I didn't know the full extremity at the time. Also, Bernie actually, my whole main thing of the reason I love Bernie is the healthcare. Like, people need to stop this system of the healthcare, of all these products and the corporations being able to give everyone chemicals that causes them cancer, and then it to be funneling a system back into people then having to refinance their houses, being hu- hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt because they get cancer, people not able to afford their diabetes medication, like stuff like that, especially when just in Canada and in Mexico, these things are affordable. Just right outside the border on both sides, these medications are affordable. So that is my number one thing with that's kind of one of a big topic that I care about politically because I'm not saying everything needs to be centralized with healthcare, but this system of profit, of chemicals that are illegal in every other country, where the entirety of Europe doesn't allow these things in the food, doesn't allow these things in the cosmetics. A whole bunch of places in Asia don't allow these in the cosmetics. Places in Central and South America don't even allow some of these ingredients, but they're allowed to put these cancer-causing ingredients here and not even sometimes even having to notify us or tell us. And then they rig the scientific academic research. They take over it and they control all the funding, which is also for profit. Again, this for profit system is gone to an extreme that has become so poisonous. And this is why we have the uprising of communism fantasies. Okay. So let's get a little into the communism stuff. So let me see. I have a couple of notes here. Okay, so it's interesting that whenever you really look up the definition of communism, they always want to talk about it like it's only an ideology, like it's only a theory, it's only an ideology. It is not only an ideology. We have communist countries in the world right now: China, North Korea, Cuba, and Vietnam. These are the biggest communist countries in the world today. This is not a good example of a government. This is actually the exact type of government that we don't want. So it's interesting that when you look online for these definitions, they kind of refuse to accept that communism is a real government that is in existence. And they talk about it in this like philosophical, ideological way. And there's a big difference between Karl Marx and his essays, his Communist Manifesto, his poems, his little quotes that say, like, "Workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains." It's very nice within the container. So, like, within that small container, like, and guys, like, the people who are here are a lot of the spiritual people. When we're in this spiritual group, we're talking about like 5D, the fifth dimension, the new earth. We also understand that this is something that it can't fit into the world the way it is right now. So we have these ideologies of like, we would love a utopian world. We would love a world where everybody prospers. We'd love a world where everything is just and everything is fair. But even us crazy spiritual people know that that concept of 5D is not fitting into this reality that we're living in right now. So we know that like I could read Dolores Cannon and be like, "Wow, I love the concept of the new earth." But do I think that this should be what the government, if the government got a hold of that and took over it, that that's the way it would play out? No. So this like stuff with Karl Marx, where a lot of these like leftists are now calling themselves communists and calling themselves Marxists. It's like, get your fucking head out of the sand, because let's look at communist countries. And what's crazy is I've had a lot of people in my comments today specifically saying like, "Oh, well, clearly you don't know what communism is." And I'm like, "Babe, you don't know what communism is." Open your fucking eyes. Actually, you don't know what communism is. You're talking about fairy tales written by a philosopher. Like, and that's the thing. These people have the privilege of living in a country like the US, living in a free country, getting to fantasize about what communism could be like. But go find out. Oh, that's right. You can't. You can't ask people in communist countries what they think because they're not allowed to have access to this full internet. This video would be blocked. Try to contact someone in China, contact someone in North Korea, see what they think. Oh, you can't. Because that's how communism actually plays out in this container of reality that we live in right now. Now, it would be nice to be able to live in a classless society where everybody lives communally. That's beautiful. However, don't you dare let that shit get into the government's hands. I'm telling you right now, don't you dare let that shit get into the government's hands because, like everything else, they get their dirty paws on it. So it's interesting that people understand what fascism is very quickly, but they romanticize communism. So, okay, so communism is an ideology, according to the definition, even though it's really plain out, aiming for a classless society where the means of production are owned communally, eliminating private property. It is based on Marxist theories, advocating for a society where goods are distributed based on need and state eventually withers away. Lovely, lovely dream, isn't it? Um, it's not real. And w- so many people responded to me privately today in my DMs who are Cuban, who were telling me, like, thank you for saying this stuff in your comments today. Because they're like, the amount of family members that have died trying to escape communism and then to watch people fantasize about it from the privilege and the safety of this constitutional republic that we live in, which, yes, there's a lot of flaws in the US, but this is a very safe country. And when crimes happen, we can hope for some justice. Not saying there's always justice, but we can actually hope for it. Let me show you another chart. Oh God, the book's falling apart. Okay. Okay. Let me move my thing here. Okay, so we have the constitutional republic at the top. So you see, we have federal government, federal government, and then there's the state government, and then all of these other facets. Some fall under the federal government, some fall under the state government. And then we have these things on the side which are privatized. So Labor is privatized. Finances are privatized. Business is privatized. Charities are privatized. The police, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I thought the police fall under the state, but okay. Education, privatized, but also falls under the state as well. Then we have the federal government. We have the three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. Then we have state governments, which is the courts, the city, and the county. Okay. So that's the way that it's structured in what we call the checks and balances, which is what the founding fathers specifically set up. Now, under democratic socialism, everything would be owned by the executive. This looks freaking scary. Do you want all of that controlled by the same person? It's not just, "Oh, la, 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 everybody gets what they need and everybody is equal." No, that is not what actual communism is. That's the la, la, la version, okay? So, the reason it doesn't work is there's a concentration of power. There's only one thing in power, and that's why they all turn into dictatorships. That's why these countries don't thrive. So, and the thing that's just so crazy is watching these people argue in the comments with people that are from Cuba, people whose families still live in Cuba, watching them argue with people who grew up in the Soviet Union and have escaped, and they're arguing with these people in the comments. They're like, "Yeah, well, lived experiences and everything." And it's like, you're literally grasping at straws right now. So, as we know, the Soviet Union was communist regime from up until 1991. Like, sometimes it's crazy to realize that this happened still in most of our lifetime. And so, I'm just gonna name off some of the countries that were all under communism, some under the Soviet Union, some on their own or separately, because then there's a lot of shit that was going on with communism at the time. Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, also Czech Republic, Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, Croatia, Serbia, and Slovenia, also Afghanistan and Somalia. So, my friend right now, she's in Croatia and she was in Serbia yesterday. And she said, as she was watching my stories talking about this today on Instagram, she sent me a voice note and she's like, "It's so crazy that you're talking about this right now." She said, "Because when she got into Serbia, there was this heaviness. And Serbia only got its like democracy, its government in like 2006. So this is very recent. It's less than 20 years." And she said, once you step into the country, there's this despair, there's this heaviness, but like there's a lot of really beautiful things. Like the churches are just absolutely out of this world, gorgeous. And she's like looking at the churches, but she's like, there's this really heavy feeling here. And so there was this man outside of one of the churches, and he was like, had his golden retriever with him. So then she starts like talking to the dog, and then the guy hears her accent and he's like, "Where are you from?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm from California." And he's like, "You better get out of this country, run, and don't look back." And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "I'm not saying this to scare you." He's like, "This is a communist country. It's fucked up here. You should not be here. How long are you staying? And where are you going next? Like, you gotta go, lady." And she's like, "What are you talking about? Didn't you guys like get your like didn't aren't you like liberated?" And then he's like, "That's all bullshit." He's like, "Yeah, we're technically liberated on paper." He's like, "Everything is the same." He's like, "Everybody still believes the same stuff. It's still the same shit happening. It's still corrupt. It's the same shit." He's like, "You should not stay here very long." He's like, "This place is beautiful, but this is not safe. This is not a good place to visit." And so, she was only staying for 1 day in Serbia, and she was like, she felt when she came there that she was like, it's so heavy right here. And you talk to people from Slovenia, you talk to people from Belarus. These people are very conservative when they come here. They vote Republican when they come here. That Cuban people, I grew up in a neighborhood that was very Cuban and very Russian. These people are all Republicans. There's this concept of like all immigrants are Democrats. That's not true. That's not true because people who lived in these communist countries are very terrified of it happening. And it's very like interesting that when people talk about fascism, it's very clear what they mean. So let me put up the definition of fascism. Okay. So fascism, far right, authoritarian, ultra natural nationalist political ideology characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, a strong regime of society and the economy. It often emphasizes aggressive nationalism and is opposed to liberal democracy and socialism. That's so interesting that these definitions are so extremely different, where the communist definition is like, "Ooh, it's classless society and everybody gets their needs met." Okay. Well, then why do all the communist countries, and this is the thing someone was arguing with me in the comments about today. They're like, "Oh, well, you know why those countries are communist? It's because they had to fight off colonizers." And I'm like, "You you're so vapid because if you think that China is not trying to take over Taiwan right now. That's why I usually stream this also on TikTok. I ain't even going to bother streaming this on TikTok. I'll be banned off that app for everything that I have to say in this video. So there's no Tuesday Night Live on TikTok tonight because they're trying to take over Taiwan. Like Taiwan wants its independence and they refuse it. Hong Kong is still a part of China. They're not allowed to leave. There's 5 million slaves living in China right now. 5 million people enslaved. Like this person was talking about like, "Oh, well that's because like basically like the bad Europeans had to do it." I'm like, "Look what's playing out in 2024. There's 5 million slaves there." North Korea, 10% of the population is currently enslaved. This is not a utopian government. It's easy to see why fascism is bad. It says it in the definition. Communism, though, is like, what the fuck? And it's crazy. Like, people double down on these beliefs, and it's like, it's very easy for you to fantasize because you read a little poem by Karl Marx, and Karl Marx was not a working guy, okay? He was a private school little twat, okay? Like, everybody acts like he was not a working man either. Okay, so there's this book, Transylvanian Sunrise. You guys might remember on TikTok, I did a little series about it. It has really nothing to do with the topic I'm talking about, but there is something very interesting in here that has always stuck out to me. So, a quick background, this is kind of like the Stranger Things of Romania. That basically the Montauk Project happened in Romania in the 70s, and under communist rule, that this was happening within the government, that they were experimenting with like psychic abilities and stuff like that. And this follows the story of a guy who was one of these kind of 11 in um, Stranger Things, is kind of like the guy in this book. He was brought there as a child because it was a communist government. They were basically convinced his family to give him to the government, and there's a whole bunch of crazy stuff that there's an underlying communist theme in here. However, he ends up being a product of the government, owned by the government until he's in his 40s. In his 40s, now this is where things get a little crazy and conspiracy, but this is why you're here. So at a certain point of the book, he is approached by people who are at the highest level of Freemasonry. And these people say that they're above these 30 degrees, 33 degrees of Freemasonry, that they are above it, that they're the Bilderberg level and above that. So the Bilderberg group and above, and basically some like Illuminati shit. And basically, they want this guy because they want his abilities to be one of them and to work for them and to basically use his remote viewing and stuff like that for, their own gain. Oh, hi, Zark. Thank you. So and it's amazing. When I'm looking for something in a book, most times I can find it. Excuse me. And so I was flipping through this book and I'm like, there's a part where he's talking to this high level, kind of above Freemasonry Freemason, this above Bilderberg level Freemason dude who basically says that all of these 33 levels below are just the show to make it look like a charitable organization. So, um, basically, and this guy's telling him all the secrets of what they've done to the governments and what they've done. It's crazy. There's so much interesting stuff in this book, but let me read you this, which is what I was looking for you. And so this is like this high level European Freemason type of guy. And he's talking to the main character. And he's saying, we will only attain complete influence and control upon humans when we succeed to supervise everything. The collected forces and powers of the members belong to all of our organizations and will gradually lead to such totalitarianism when the individual freedom and autonomy is supervised from the point where every human has been born. So basically, they want full supervision from the moment of birth, from even before birth. That's the level of control they want. They don't just want control of humans, they want control from the day they're born. And all of it is supervised and all of it is under their control and all of the autonomy is under their control. To make sure of this and to experience the validity of the result, we invented, as a mere experiment, communism. However, we noticed that the constant drawbacks and people's anguish, also the cult of personality that would always go for the heads of all the communist countries, created some tensions and could enable some clearness upon reality for individuals who might have caused trouble in the time. The communist system was only appropriate for a certain period of time during several decades. It became inefficient later and became dangerous for our interests. And you see what he's saying there, the way that the cult of personality came for the heads, because then eventually these people all overthrow the government because this ideology doesn't work over time. So it says that they created the communism as an experiment. The powers that be, this like Illuminati force, like you said, you could take this book or leave it. It's a very interesting book. It's supposed to be allegedly a true story, but there's a lot of very interesting things in here. But besides the point, this is something that I wanted to share because it's like it was efficient for a certain level of time, which makes sense. Why communism was taking all over the world, and now there's almost nowhere that has communism. So, when we understood this, we decided to finish this experiment and we gave the green light for political changes. We must continue the illusion of something different. That's what they do. That's the game, is to just keep making people believe that there's change. That's the true way that they stay in power, is false change. We must create the illusion of something different, but we already knew that nothing could be changed in one day. So we were expecting lots of social rebellions meant to change mentalities, goals, and the ways of thinking. But we are those who insidiously penetrate the main ideas of new social systems by means of media, politics, in finances, particularly meant to strain the relationship between people and government. Welfare shouldn't be a general condition, but we want a certain stratum of corrupted people who are therefore going to support our interests without having the smallest clue about it. And on the contrary, the appearances always make them believe that it's up to them to act and make decisions that they are having, and that when they are having the power, which we must support them in order to not let the spell go down. So basically, he talks about how then they have these other, they will always kind of have the illusion of change. And then a few pages later, um, he says, there are some special cases, such as the USA, where we cannot allow any mistakes or exterior actions except the ones that we provide. This is why every president of the USA is our choice and the outcome of our Masonic goals. He must absolutely be the outstanding member in all of our Masonic lodges. Most of the time, they belong to the second rank. In order to perfectly hide the political and financial maneuvers we display, we demanded the most spectacular and hilarious idea that we managed to implement to the crowds in the last 200 years. This is probably one of our most valuable additions to the provided great advantage to us, that has provided great advantage to us, and can still be quite efficient these days. You might be surprised, but it sounds so familiar. Democracy. Exactly. This is why they want us to believe that this country is a democracy. It is a constitutional republic. Okay. The concept itself is not worth a brass. Still, it is the most essential piece in the gear of our plans, and it is quite popular. The main reason that it stirs vanity to people and makes them crave for power. In fact, it only generates some sort of hatred, fight, and temptation, which makes a great frame for manipulation. The secret political games and high financial and powerful interests are apparently in the hands of your electors. You have to proceed to slight compromises in order to enjoy all the advantages later on. What is the advantage we actually draw by means of democracy? It usually leads to the disunion between different social layers of a country and the downright conflicts between people in the world. The idea we promote in order to actually conceal our real plans and actions under everybody's silent agreement concerns the illusions of free choice for every individual. But when we deal with tens of hundreds of millions of people so stressed and so perverted, and their so called free choice can easily be directed by many different methods. The tempest must go wild, but its main direction can be influenced so that it may protect certain areas and destroy others. We found the easiest and safest way to attain chaos and disunion. You see, despite the highly charitable appearances and the moral values of we polished democracy in, it actually hides the core we had started from when we enhanced in time the hatred between fellows, the blind struggle for the facile, and the ethereal power and the lack of unity. Literally. Thanks, Ark. It's like how the mega corporations give the illusion of choice on shelves, but all different brands, but are owned by the same damn company. Yes, exactly. And the illusion of choice is so interesting, right? And then see how they want to control the autonomy from birth. This is why I triggered a lot of people with my Instagram post about it because I compared the vaccine. So the left really wanted this vaccine to be mandated a couple years ago. That to a lot of people was imposing on body autonomy and bodily rights of the individual, especially it was not approved by the FDA. And that was one thing. So the left pushed for that. And everybody used the social stuff, you know. Oh, okay, well, then you shouldn't be allowed in society. You shouldn't be allowed to eat. You shouldn't be allowed to go to doctors. You should lose your health care if you don't do it. And then we have the other side. And this is what I said when I had friends who were, you know, saying stuff like that. Like I did have some friends that were like, oh, well, if people don't take the vaccine, then they shouldn't be allowed to go to the hospital if they get sick. And I'm like, do you hear yourself? Like, bro, I don't go to the doctor for nothing. I got to be like losing an eye to go to the doctor. So I'm like, that's interesting. And I told people, I'm like, even if you don't care about this issue, if you let them do this with the vaccine, they're coming for abortion next year. I'm telling you right now. People acted like I was crazy saying that. They came for abortion. And what I said, this vaccine allows body autonomy to open the door to another body autonomy right. Then I said the next thing they're going to come for is the gay marriage because that's what they're going to do. First with the vaccine, then come for women, then come for the gays. And then what's going to happen is they're going to keep sticking their hands in and in and in until the only people that are left have that it didn't affect them, doesn't affect me, doesn't affect me, doesn't affect me. There's going to be no one to help you stand up because there'll be no one left with any rights. That's why you have to stand up for the rights of stuff even that you don't believe in. Like personally, I don't want a gun. You better believe I'm not letting the government take those guns because that is one of our rights, one of our constitutional rights, and we cannot let them chip away at the Constitution. I don't have a religion, but you better believe I'm going to fight for that freedom of religion. You know, I'm not a murderer, but you better believe I'm going to fight for those free trials, fair trials, because and the right to be represented in a trial, even for a pedo, even for someone who I think is scum of the earth. Even when all this stuff with Danny Masterson was going on, you know, I covered the Harvey trial, but Danny's trial was right down the hall. And people were all like, Ashton Kutcher's disgusting. He wrote a letter. And I'm like, guys, this is our process. What if it was someone wrongly accused? We need to uphold the process in this quote unquote democracy everybody wants to call it, we need to uphold the process whether we agree with it or not. Because if we allow them to chip away at the rights, then there's no rights left for anybody. So I don't want a gun. I don't have a religion. I don't need a trial, but I need to fight for that right. You know, I don't see myself having any abortions. However, you better believe I'm going to fight for that right for people to be able to, and the same thing with the vaccine. If people want to take it, take it. And it was interesting because both sides, people got super angry. The vaccine people were angry at me. The abortion people were angry at me. And it's like, exactly. Exactly. This is why we live in a quote unquote free country where you can actually have a difference of opinion. So there is this Colin Quinn quote. I don't have it in front of me. I saw he did a one man show years ago that I went and saw on Broadway, and I always remember this one line from it where he says, he's like, "We have the greatest government in the world. We have one more choice than fascism," and it's like exactly, exactly. We're that close. Like, it really is, and we really do need to get crazy about our rights, even if you disagree with it. And, there's people more on the patriot side of things where, you know, they're really against the abortion, but it's like, do not let the government get their sticky little hands on that, even if it's something you don't agree with, and that's also I just did this video about what is God, because we have this one nation under God, but God means a lot of different things to people. God sometimes is a monotheistic God, but also sometimes it's a pantheistic God. Like, I believe more in the pantheistic belief of like, God is the universe. God is everything. God is good. God is evil too. God is everything. God's this microphone. God's this camera. God's the air in this room. God is in me. God is in all of you. That's my belief of God. So, and it was interesting. The one thing though I was trying to find is in my conversations with God book. I was listening to the audiobook. I don't know which book it's in. I think it's in the third book, but I was trying to find. I have all three of them in front of me. I was flipping through, and I say I always can find what I want in a book. Usually I can. I could not find it but I only started at 5:59. However, there's a clip of it that they talk about how one nation under God, that this is the reason why America was such a successful country for so long, is this concept, kind of almost like manifestation, almost like creating your reality, almost like rewriting the blueprint, rewriting the matrix, to have this concept of one nation under God was this thing of like, okay, bring your poor, bring your sick, bring this one, bring all these different people here. This is the melting pot. Come to this place, have the American dream, build the new life for yourself. We'll take all of the people from everywhere and build the rest. And that's why it has prospered and has had all of these inventions and all of these great advances. But that has fallen through the cracks. And the book talks about how basically then the way that doesn't play out in reality, the way that then there's, well, pick yourself up by the bootstraps, figure it out. Oh, okay. And then basically it starts to kind of not take care of its sick, to not take care of its poor, to not take care of certain groups, and that's where it's starting to collapse. And so that book is written in 1994, and it says then, from God himself, itself, themself, whatever you want to call it, it says, because it's like a channeled work, basically like this is the downfall of the US, is this one nation under God concept, which has been the driving force to make this country great, which is what it says in the book. It says great. And I thought that was interesting because, Make America Great has become such a crazy, triggering, like people will literally want you to lose your job for saying that statement. But it's interesting that that's what it says in the book. And when I heard that, I was like, when I was listening to it in the audiobook, which I have it linked on my playlists. So I have my spiritual books for awakening playlist. If you go to my page, my channel on YouTube, and then click playlists, it's on there. So all three books are on there. I highly suggest you listen. It's so beautiful. I want to do a series on it. Okay, let me go to a couple more definitions here. So, um, a plutocracy and an oligarchy. So, plutocracy is a society or a system where the wealthy hold the power and influence over governance, often resulting in policies that favor the rich. Yeah, that sounds a lot more like America than a democracy because we're not a fucking democracy, okay? And an oligarchy, a form of power structure where a small group of people, often in the same social, economic, or political class, control a country or an organization. So we're more in the plutocracy, oligarchy than we are in democracy in the way that it's playing out in reality. So what I think is interesting is the plutocracy reminds me of the Pluto return. So as you know, the Pluto return is where Pluto was and then it will return. Like we have a Saturn return at 27 years old because it takes 27 years for it's actually around like closer to 30 depending on where you're born. But that's when Saturn comes back into the position that it was when you were born. Now, because Pluto is so far away from Earth, it takes about 250 years for it to make a Pluto return. So we had our Pluto return in 2022 into the beginning of 2023, I believe. And so a Pluto return, as we know, Pluto is like the transformation, the uncovering, the endings, the beginnings, very Scorpio energy, very death card in tarot energy. And then that's what the US just went through into the end of 2022, beginning of 2023. And so another interesting thing is that when Rome went through its Pluto return, that's what started the fall of Rome. And this is why they say all great empires only last about 200 to 250 years. Yeah, because that Pluto return hits. So it's very interesting, the plutocracy, it's not related to that at all. But that word Pluto and plutocracy, I was like, it's so interesting because that's what these things are coming to the surface. The shadow is coming out. The all of this stuff is coming out. So, let's see. Was there anything else in my notes here that I wanted to talk about? Okay, no, I think that's good. So, what I'll end on is I've already discussed this with you guys before that what I believe is going to happen in this election. And like I said, I'm streaming this at the same time as the debate. I don't know, obviously, what to expect with the debate, nor do I care. Ever since I did the ayahuasca last month in Peru, it's been exactly 1 month now. Um, I came back thinking, like, you know what? What happens, happens. Who wins, loses. Who loses, loses. It's a lose lose situation. So that's really where my focus has shifted since coming back and being very non-reacted, reactive and disconnected from it. And, just to reiterate, what came up in my ayahuasca journey was that Kamala will probably win and that basically she's a convenient scapegoat that she's a very convenient scapegoat. I mean, she didn't even actually run herself. Did Kamala even want to be president? I mean, sure, I'm sure everybody would want to be president if someone was like, "Hey, Natasha, you wanna be president? Hey, Zark, you wanna be president? Hey, Whitney, you wanna be president?" Like, of course, anyone would say yes. But she was not actively going in that direction. She was not so she kind of is almost like a useful idiot. Like, the term useful idiot is kind of like the perfect unwilling victim to kinda take the fall for something. And, like, I kind of feel like she's getting sucked in to be, a scapegoat, and what the ayahuasca told me is that this is just history repeating itself. This is 250 years of corruption and bullshit and all the stuff and all the dark and all the shadow coming up getting pinned on a woman because it's Eve in the Bible getting blamed for all the evil in the world, Pandora with Pandora's box getting blamed for all evil in the world, and that basically she's the perfect person to pin this on because she barely I feel like in some way almost like bad for her, even though she's probably gonna win, but it's like inheriting a curse, you know? Yeah. And so the other thing too that's really crazy is like all the astrologers and all the psychics are saying a lot of really crazy stuff. Crazier than what I'm saying. You know, the astrologers and the psychics are all saying there's no winner. And I've heard this so many times. I've heard people Sloan Bella is saying there's not going to be a winner of the election. Other astrologers are saying that the results are going to be compromised. People are not going to know the legitimacy of the results, that there's not going to be real results. We're going to have to wait for results, and then the results are going to be in question. Other people are saying neither Kamala or Trump is going to win. Some crazy fucked up shit's going to happen, and neither of the people on the ballot are going to win. Other people are saying that Trump in October has a medical issue, some severe medical issue that leads to him not being able to be on the ballot. I don't know. Some people are saying that maybe weather, a catastrophe, something happens either the day of the election or right before the election, which leads to the election not happening. People are saying crazy stuff in the astrology and psychic spaces. I'm like, listen, I'm just saying a coup. I'm just saying a coup happened, you know? And I'm not even saying Kamala is the one running the coup. She's the one that they're putting out as the scapegoat for the coup. Because if she got this far without a single vote, you can't stop that trajectory. The trajectory of being able to be a front runner without even one single vote, I mean, that's undefeatable in my opinion. You keep hearing psychics saying that they couldn't see past October. I know this is what's crazy. Like, what is going on? A German astrologer said there would be no results. This is what is crazy. Time to end these curses. I know we all make national elections to national holiday, paid weekend to vote. Yeah. I mean, we need to let the vote actually count, I think, right? Because I mean, I'm not a believer in I believe in selections, not elections. Like like this book said, I've been a big believer of it. There's something called royal blood theory. Okay, I have to get going, but let me pull it up first. Most royal candidate theory. Let me share this. Share screen. Okay. You guys see it? Okay. Let me zoom in a little. Okay. Is this a good? Yeah. Okay. Most royal candidate theory by Harold Brooks Baker proposed that the winning candidate in every United States presidential election had always been the candidate with the greatest percentage of royal blood in his pedigree, and this pattern could be predicted to the outcome of all upcoming events. He promoted it during several election cycles, ending with the 2004 election, the last one before his death. Every 4 years, a number of election cycles, he publicized his theory during the presidential election, touring to talk about in the circuit. Okay, he gave examples of presidents. Those losing opponents did not have royal blood. In the example of Ronald Reagan versus Walter Malday, I don't know how to say that. Okay. Um, or where he claimed the winner simply had more royalty, such as between Kennedy and Nixon. Based on his theory, he predicted that John Kerry would defeat George Bush in the 2004 election because they shared a number of royal bloodlines. Kerry had more royal ancestors than Bush. However, Bush was reelected and he died a few months later. Okay. Um, and this is already on Wikipedia, so it made some pretty mainstream news. There is a girl, let me see, 12-year-old, all presidents related. 12-year-old discovers that all US presidents are related. Like, not saying that this is the most legitimate source, but there's so many videos about this. This is just the one that popped up first. Um, let's see. Okay, so there was this Canadian girl. She was doing her genealogy, and then she found out that she was related to a president. Yeah, here we go. Oh, wait.
She and her grandfather say that President Obama is related to all but one U.S. president. We get more tonight from Action News reporter Felix Cortez, who's live in our Salinas newsroom. Well, Dan, the youngster spent the summer, really all summer, tracing the family tree of our presidents. Her conclusion that all the presidents, with the exception of one, share the same grandfather.
Okay, I don't know if you could hear because of how the sound is, because it's coming from my computer and then this is set up to the mic. So I won't play the full thing, but basically, um, yeah, the little girl, 12 years old, saw that all of Obama was she was related to Obama, and then she found out everyone was related to Obama. And look at her chart. Okay, if a 12-year-old girl was able to figure this out, it's obviously not that big of a secret, right? No offense to the 12-year-olds. But, that's the thing that's crazy about this is that, like, that was my intro and you guys, if you know, if you've watched my stuff for a while, that was really my introductory into the conspiracy world, was this guy, he had come into my store, and he was going crazy, telling me everybody's in on it, it's a grand conspiracy, it's everything, and then he was like, I was like, "Okay," and I pushed him out, and, you know, I talk about it more, but, um I was pushing him out, he's like, "Well, just look it up. All the presidents are related. They're all the royal bloodline." And, he's like, "The presidents are selected. None of the elections are real." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Sure, weirdo." And then I went home and looked it up, and I went down a rabbit hole for the next, like, 3 years straight and, like, almost went insane. Yep, England's monarch didn't end. It just transformed. Exactly. Exactly. Oh, yeah, made me think of the guy that started my awakening, yeah. All the presidents are related. It's crazy, man. This whole thing, we are in a really weird time. Let's see, I'm just gonna skim through the comments here. Yep, we're going through a dark night of the soul as a collective. People are waking up. Everything will be okay. I agree. I think we're just gonna have a little rocky time. Yep, the illusion of choice. Maybe it's you just being nihilistic in your perspective of what's going on in the world, but you'd rather not be nihilistic. It's just hard when we live in such a divided world. Yeah, I mean, that's what they want. How interesting was those excerpts from the Transylvanian Sunrise? Let's see. Trying to picture America being a communist country and wondering about all these rich billionaires. What would happen to Kim K? Exactly. Exactly. That's why it would not work because they say in communism, it's to redistribute the wealth. And also, you know, there's karmic stuff at play. Like, everybody is meant to have a different life for a different reason. Like, not saying that people aren't meant to be equal in treated that way with their rights and, you know, safety and, you know, things like that. But it's like some people's karmic lesson is to be a greedy ass billionaire. Like, there's a reason why Kim Kardashian is who she is. There's some karmic lesson there. You know, Jeff Bezos, there's some karmic lesson there, you know? So it's like a lot of times people see like, oh yeah, what like there's a karmic lesson in being poor. There's a karmic lesson in being super greedy and rich too, you know, in being Bezos, you know? Are the leaders aware of this or do they think they can help the country? You know, I think it's mixed. I think that some of them believe that they're doing the right thing. And I think that some of them know that they're just playing a game. Okay. Yep, communism doesn't allow for free will. That's really important to remember too, is like when people talk about communism, they talk about like kind of this idealistic thing, but it's really like, okay, well, ask if there's gay people in those countries. Ask what people's pronouns are in those countries. I bet you there's nothing outside of her and him, you know? There's no gay people. You're not allowed to like not be married as an adult woman or you're basically chopped liver. Like, that's the thing is, like, look at these communist countries. There isn't, like, the freedom of choice that we have here. And yeah, America's not perfect, but it's like, that's a lot worse. That's far worse. We don't get to be who we are in these other countries. People don't get to express themselves. I mean, Natasha asked if, is Russia still communist? No, it's technically not, but then there's still a lot of crazy shit. So, like, in Russia, one of my ex-boyfriends was Russian, and I'm like, "What is the deal with Putin? Like, do you guys not have elections there? Like, well, how does he win?" And they're like, "Oh, people keep voting him in, and when he has to take a break, he has someone else, and people know to vote for that person, and then he basically controls that person, and then he gets to go in again after that term limit is up." So it is technically like a democracy in some way. However, one of the things that people really love about Putin in Russia is one that he really like pushes that nationalism, which goes more towards the fascism. But like we said, fascism and communism play out the same way. So like he's always like, everybody says Russia's the bad guy. Everybody's trying to come after Russia. That's why you need a big, strong leader to protect all of you guys. Otherwise, everyone's going to tread on us, you know? So, like, that's one of the aspects. And then the other thing, which does kind of lean towards communism, is that he had told me that basically Putin has this like kind of spiel where he says, everybody owns the oil in Russia. If you're Russian, this oil belongs to you. These resources are all of our resources. So then when they sell oil, he sends like a little $200 check to everyone like once a year. And to those people in the small villages, they get that little $200 check and they're like, well, he loves us. He loves our country. So it's like interesting that it is kind of like that little bit of that values of like, oh, our resources are all of our resources. And for a very little check, he kind of buys all of the people with the kind of communist concept. Okay. Let's see. Their karma is probably to overcome selfishness and to help others with their riches, but they're failing miserably. Exactly. You wonder who T and H are related to. All of them. They're all related. They're all related to each other. Um, Harris, I don't know, but don't be mistaken because she's brown, because Obama's related to everybody. Like these I mean, Trump, they have already done Trump's bloodline stuff because he was ninth cousins with Hillary. He was cousins with all of the other candidates. Biden was all the cousins of candidates. I just haven't seen anybody break down Kamala's yet. Um, doesn't help that Putin keeps killing his opposers. Yeah, exactly. We need to stop that war. It's out of control. Okay, guys, I'm going to hop off. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This topic that everyone voted on Instagram and said this is what we wanted to talk about today. So, hopefully, this was helpful to people to have a little bit of a better understanding of, how to stay more in the center, how to stay more neutral, and to not get sucked up in the left right Super Bowl game of the world. Have I been watching Marina Jacoby's content about Trump? No, I haven't had any time to really watch that much. So I haven't watched Marina Jacoby's stuff in a very long time now. But I'm pretty sure she likes Trump, right? Because she comes from a communist country. And literally all the people who come from communist countries vote for Trump. Like, trust me. Everybody I know that's Cuban, Russians, Belarus, Serbians, everybody I know that comes from communist countries votes for Trump. So I wouldn't be surprised if all the stuff that she posts about him is really good. Um, it's a riveting show. Okay, everybody. Thank you. Like I said, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with liking either candidate. Anybody has the free will to do whatever they want, to vote however they want, if they want to vote, if they don't want to vote. It's just keeping a broader perspective on the whole game. And, it's kind of like, if you're in a tennis match, you don't want to when you're in the match, you're going to get very focused on the ball. But remember, we're not really the ones in the match, right? We're the ones watching from the sidelines. We're not Serena Williams, we're not the one playing the game. We're watching the game. So remember that. That's kind of what my point is here, is to not get so crazy, worked up, because it's about to get crazy. These next 50 days, we don't know what's gonna happen. Um, People are saying the worst of the worst is gonna happen, and, so we gotta keep our heads on straight and remember that at the end of the day, we're in control of our own reality. There's a level of it, like, so this is what was in Conversations with God, is it talks about how we can create our own reality, but when we're not actively trying to create our own reality, the collective reality can kind of sometimes take over along with our subconscious thoughts. So this is why it's really important. Do your affirmations. Say stuff like, I'm safe. Everything works out for me. I'm always on the highest timeline. Say these things to program your reality, because if you're not controlling your reality, you're going to get sucked into the collective reality, and that will become the manifestation of what you experience. This was way more interesting than the debate. Thank you, Whitney. Okay, guys, have a good night. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.